Hey everyone, how you doing? I'm coming to you guys today with a magic discussion, and this is going to be on the topic of black creature removal. Now, for you magic players that are like really new to the game, black is really good at just removing and disrupting things, especially when it comes to your opponent's hand and creatures. But most of you guys know that already, so I'll just go over the list of some of the black creature removal cards that I think are good, and this is actually going to be a three-part series, broken into separate categories of destroying creatures, edict effects, or effects that make your opponent sacrifice a creature, and then the last category is just going to be kind of an off one, black cards that make your opponent exile creatures. They're not commonly played, but they are still out there, so this video will be discussing the ones that destroy creatures, probably the most common type, and probably the best ones, in my opinion, but that's arguable. So, to kick off this list, and this will be pretty much in alphabetical order, we'll start off with Disembowel. And what Disembowel reads is it's an instant that costs 1 black mana, and you can pay X. And you can destroy a target creature with converted mana cost X. So you have to pay the exact amount for the converted mana cost, which admittedly can be an issue mid-game, I believe, because if your opponent drops a big creature and you don't have that exact mana plus 1 black, it can present a problem. But most of the time, this is a pretty solid card. So I haven't looked at the prices for these cards yet, so you'll look them up on your own, unfortunately. I'll do that in later videos, though, I promise. But if you can get your hands on cheap copies of this, I would consider running it. It wouldn't be a terrible option. Next up is Doomblade. Now, this is a pretty famous one that a lot of people know about because it can hit a lot of things. So Doomblade costs 1 black and 1 of any, and it's an instant that says destroy target non-black creature. Now, granted, if your opponent is playing decks with black creatures in there, then you're not going to be able to hit those. But roughly 80% of creatures, 4 out of the 5 colors, not including multicolored monsters, can be hit by this card. So you get to remove almost anything for 2 mana. It's really good. A lot of people use this card. Next up is a card that I think is even more versatile than Doomblade, but not a ton of people play. Go for the Throat, an instant for 1 black and 1 of any, and you get to destroy a target non-artifact creature. Okay, so this basically, in my opinion, says destroy target creature because the only major deck that runs artifact creatures, besides maybe like Batterskull, because any deck can sideboard that in, but that's really the only one. The only deck that runs a ton of artifact creatures is either Tron or Affinity/Robots. So, and you have way better cards such as Stony Silence or Creeping Corrosion for those matchups. Basically, Go for the Throat is destroy target creature for 2 mana, and I would definitely consider running it because it's just really cheap. Get rid of pretty much any monster. Why wouldn't you do that? Good card, in my opinion. Next up is probably one of the best pieces of black removal that the game's ever seen, in the form of a Hero's Downfall. 2 black mana and then 1 of any, and it's an instant where you can destroy a target creature or a planeswalker. And this is where it's interesting because you get to get rid of creatures for 3 mana. That's great at instant speed, not to mention. But you can also pop troublesome planeswalkers, and I don't think you'll be wanting. And this honestly gets rid of a lot of problem cards. There are things like Garruk Apex Predator, Kiora Master of the Depths, Liliana of the Veil is a really common one that you that you don't want to deal with. We'll talk about her later in the Edict video, but I digress. It's a versatile card, and that's why I think it's a really great piece of removal, especially when it's at instant speed. Thumbs way up, guys. The next card is pretty good, I would say, for starting players and or budget players. It's a sorcery called Bone Splinters. Now, it's 1 black mana, so granted it's really cheap, but as an additional cost, you have to sacrifice your creature to destroy a target creature. It's any, so it can be on your side of the field, but you're going to be popping your opponent's monsters most of the time with this. In my opinion, it's not a bad card, but there are definitely better ones. Bone Splinters, like I said, is really good for budget decks or decks with low creature curves, so you can just spam out a lot of creatures. It's also really good, of course, in an aristocrat deck, one focused around sacrificing your own creatures to get a benefit off of it. So, Bone Splinters, it's good, but you need to find a good niche for it at the same time. Next up on the list is Killing Glare, and I kind of like this card, actually. I've just been recently going through the Wizards website and just typing in card effects, basically, and looking for a whole list. That's how this video got started, if we're being honest. And Killing Glare is 1 black and X of any color, and it's an instant where you can destroy a target creature with power X or less. This is a good card, guys. Now, granted, if your opponent summons a giant 8 power creature, well, yeah, you're gonna have to have a lot of land for this card. But most of the time, I think you will be pretty comfortable playing this at 5 or 4 mana, and it gets rid of a lot of what you would consider problem creatures. So, pretty good card in my opinion. Granted, you do have to tap out for bigger creatures, and that can be an issue. But in most situations, this is really good, especially staving off early game threats. Next up is another really, really good piece of removal called Murder. 2 black and 1 of any, an instant where it just says destroy target creature. Flat out, destroy target creature. There's not much else to say. That's pretty good removal in my opinion. Now, granted, Hero's Downfall is technically better because it's more versatile, but it's from Magic 2013, I believe, so it'd be fairly cheap. I believe so. You have to check the prices on that one, guys. Next up, after Murder comes the Murderous Cut. It's a pretty common one that you can pick up for fairly cheap. It came out of Tarkir block. I think it was Khans of Tarkir. I'm not entirely sure. But it costs 4 of any color and 1 black mana. Now, before you say what the heck, a lot of people already know by now that it has the Delve mechanic, but for people who don't know, Delve says you can exile 1 card from your graveyard to pay for 1 just average non-colored mana for this card. So if you exile 4 from your graveyard while casting this, you can only have to pay 1 black mana, and you get to destroy a target creature. This card can be better or worse than Murder. Now, Murder, granted, is just flat out 3 mana, but Murderous Cut, if you happen to have 4 cards in graveyard, is technically better because it is cheaper with the same effect. So it just depends. Like, if you're running a really spell-heavy deck, non-creature spell-heavy deck, then I would definitely recommend playing Murderous Cut. But if you kind of need your creatures on board and you don't run a ton of non-creature spells, I don't know, maybe look for other options, but Murderous Cut, still a great card no matter what deck you're playing, as long as you play black. Up next is, it's actually a Planeswalker that can destroy creatures, and it's come out recently. I think it was Oath of the Gatewatch, possibly Battle for Zendikar, I don't quite remember, but Obnixilis Reignited. 2 black and 3 of any. His +1 ability is you draw a card and lose 1 life, but his -3 ability is where he really shines. You just get to destroy a target creature. He comes out with 5 loyalty, -3 immediately, just free pop of a monster. Pretty good in my opinion, not to mention his ultimate. You give your opponent an emblem that says whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So, destroys a creature and can put your opponent on the clock if you can pull the ultimate off. Next up is the downgraded version of Hero's Downfall, Ruinous Path. It's a sorcery speed Hero's Downfall, destroy target creature or Planeswalker. Same converted mana cost, 2 black, 1 of any. It also has the Awaken mechanic for Awaken 4, so you can cast this thing for 2 black and 5 of any, and you get a 4/4 land creature. But a lot of the time you'll just be casting it for its regular cost to pop a creature or a planeswalker. Like I said, sorcery speed, so if your opponent summons something big and hasty, well, you have an issue, but good replacement that's actually still legal and standard right now, so I would definitely suggest running it. I approve of this card. Next up is a really new one out of Shadows over Innistrad. Sinister Concoction. Now, it costs 1 black mana for an enchantment, and you can pay 1 black mana, pay a life, put the top card of your library into your graveyard, discard a card, and sacrifice Sinister Concoction to destroy a target creature. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, holy crap, that's a huge cost, and that's a bad card. Well, in Shadows over Innistrad, they have the Madness mechanic and Delirium. So Delirium is triggered by having 4 or more different card types in your graveyard. So being able to fill the graveyard really quickly with this while also popping a creature can be beneficial in the long run. And Madness, of course, is triggered by discarding. So the card you discard off of this can be cast for its Madness cost, which is... it gives you plays, what I'm saying. But you kind of have to build a deck around Sinister Concoction. This is another card like Bone Splinters where you kind of have to put it in its own little niche for it to be effective. But not a bad card if it is put where it's most useful and has the most utility. So, like I said, you gotta kind of build your deck around it, but not a bad card. Next up is an older card that sees a lot of play in Modern, actually, called a Slaughter Pact. You can cast this for 0 mana, and you just destroy target non-black creature. So this is a free Doomblade. But just hold on. But at the beginning of your next upkeep, you have to pay 1 black and 2 of any color. If you don't, you just lose the game. Now, granted, it's a free spell, which is awesome. But I don't like any of the packed cards because you can play them for free, but you have to pay mana unless you lose the game. Slaughter Pact is very popular. I can understand why you want to play it, but I personally would not play this card because you can, like I said, if you don't have the mana necessary or your opponent exiles your only black mana producing land or something like that, well, you lose. So, yeah, that's my opinion on this card. It is an instant, though, so that's nice. Another standard legal piece of removal right now that's not bad. Actually, it's pretty good in my opinion. It is pretty good. Ultimate Price. An instant for 1 black and 1 of any, which is pretty common among these card types, that says destroy target monocolored creature. In formats like Modern and actually in Standard right now, because Shadows over Innistrad gave us a lot of just monocolored creatures because we lost out on the dual lands and things, or the fetch lands of Concentrator here, so there's not a ton of multicolored creatures. Or cons, yeah, and Favor Forge. Ultimate Price, it's, like I said, especially in Modern, where a lot of monocolored creatures do exist, alongside like the Morntide and Eventide. Granted, those are kind of troublesome, but great piece of removal nevertheless. It basically says destroy target creature, but if your opponent summons like Dragon Lords, well, that's awkward. So, really good against a lot of creatures, but except for mono, except for multicolored, of course. Next up is another instant for 2 black, and that's it. Called Victim of Night, and I'm actually a really huge advocate of this card because it says destroy target non-vampire, non-werewolf, non-zombie creature. So you have to keep in mind that this does kind of restrict you to certain creature types. However, you won't be running into the creature types that it can be destroyed by, at least not in the format that you can play this in, which is Modern or anything else, I assume. Victim of Night basically says destroy target creature, again for 2 mana. It's kind of like Go for the Throat, but it's 2 black, unfortunately. Unless you're going up against a dedicated vampire, werewolf, or zombie deck, which you might find vampires and werewolves, maybe zombies, and well, you wouldn't find vampires and werewolves very often. Maybe a dedicated zombie deck in Modern, but not really. So it does hit a lot of things in the format, and It's just a really solid piece of removal in my opinion, considering that the things it can't destroy, you won't run into very much, if not at all. So yeah, again, pretty a great piece of removal in my opinion. And that's all I have for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed my discussions on it. I know this seems a little rushed, and I apologize for that, but this idea was just kind of on the fly, and if I don't get it out now, I'm not going to remember it. So, this is Damon, and we'll see you guys later.